So I'm Miriam and I've lived in Oxford for 9 years, though I come from the north of England, or North Midlands, Sheffield area, Peak District, and I work as an artist. I'm a student. I do community projects and support work, and I wear shoes. They're sort of one in a long line of very similar boots that I've bought over a number of years. I struggle with shoes a lot. I don't like shoes. I don't like shopping for shoes. So I buy the same boots time after time. They're British Army assault boots, actually, is precisely what they are. But they last a long time and they're very comfortable and they're very practical. And walking in the Peak District feels very much like home. Me and my partner, and friends, sometimes we travel to Spain a lot. We may move there at some point. One of my favourite things that I did in this very pair of boots was hijack a train. I'm very involved in environmental activism and I do a lot of things with Greenpeace and other organisations, and I was involved in stopping a coal train, and the reason we did that was because the government had made promises that they were going to reduce their reliance on coal for energy, and they'd started doing that, but then they were backtracking. They were letting it slide off the agenda and people were getting very concerned about fracking, and so the government was slipping back into using coal rather than saying, well, let's look at renewables instead. So myself and about 50 Greenpeace activists quite literally hijacked a coal train which was taking thousands of tons of coal into a coal-fired power station, and then the minute the train stopped, myself and a whole load of other people suddenly appeared out of nowhere and climbed up the side of the train, which I don't know if you've ever seen these trains close up. They're absolutely enormous. They're probably about 3 times my height because I'm tiny. And I was the first person who was meant to be getting on this train, and it was really, really hard. But fortunately we had this enormous guy with us who literally just threw me up into the air, and I grabbed the top and scrabbled onto the top. And there was just this thing full of coal. And we'd had 3 attempts during the day where we'd been planning to stop the coal train and not managed to do it. And so we were absolutely delighted at this attempt that we'd actually managed it. And what we then started doing was filling these sacks with coal and then throwing them again very carefully and safely off onto the other track so that the outgoing track was blocked. You know, these things like this, you know, just to think that yes, this is something I believe in, and so I'm going to go out there and with some planning and just a group of people, you can do really, really powerful things. And so these boots were blacker than they are now because they were 9 hours I was sitting on a wagon full of coal. If I'm putting my boots on and I'm lacing my boots up, I never do that until immediately before I leave. It's always the last thing I do before I leave home. And so I then really enjoy stepping outside. And the moment I step outside, all of the difficulty of waking up and finding my energy and motivation, I walk out and I step out of my door onto grass, and there's bushes and there's trees and there's birds, and it just really, all of a sudden everything seems a bit more possible and it's a bit more energised. So I really love that, and most of the work I've done has involved working with the community and often with homeless people, people with mental health issues, drug and alcohol addiction. Partly I have a lot of respect for people in those kind of situations because they're dealing with a lot more on a daily basis than a lot of people are dealing with, and on the whole, deal with it with a degree of good humour and resilience. I think with the support work that I've done, I've worked with people who have been in incredibly hard situations, and I've often been really, really privileged to hear their stories. Yeah, these asylum seekers, just the persistence and the strength that they've shown to risk their lives again and again and again sometimes, just to be safe and somewhere where they can live peacefully and do well, and then found that that's not the case and had to keep battling. And sometimes I think I picture myself in those situations and think, would I have that strength? Would I have that resilience? But I think there's something more creative, more inspiring, more closely linked to what I perceive as being human amongst people who maybe have less. Is that the most fruitful place is always on the edge, because there's more possibilities there. So for example, a plant could grow in dry land or it could grow in water, but actually the most fruitful place would be on the border between the dry land and the water, because there's more possibilities, there's more options, and so I'm more drawn to people who perhaps live an edgier lifestyle. I've chosen for myself quite a difficult off-grid lifestyle, quite out of the system, and having done that for 12 years in various places, become increasingly aware of the degree to which, to do that, I need other people, other like-minded people around me. Hope is a really tricky word, because you can hope in something that might not come along. But I don't think I mean that. I mean some kind of belief that there is a way forward, something positive, that there will be something beyond this. I find it really quite bleak to think about, well, what's the world going to look like by the time I'm old, or in 100 years, or 200-300 years, and the predictions are grim in terms of species extinction, habitat loss, human extinction. Maybe it's all pretty grim. But to me, the response to that is to have hope. The grimmer it is, the more important it is to have hope in something, that something will change, that there is good, that there is something out there. And the more hope you have in that, the more you can work towards it. Without the hope, I have friends who've lost hope, and if you lose that hope, then you stop working towards those changes. And if we don't work towards those changes, they're not going to happen. Money and working has never been a priority, therefore I'm not very rich, therefore I live in a small space, I have to mend things. I don't necessarily have facilities laid on as readily as some people, which can make things a little chaotic at times. But I'm all right with that, I think. I think it's a real privilege. It's extraordinary, the level of free movement that we do have. And I think Britain's decision to leave the EU and how that will impact freedom of movement, and possibly even for myself, me and my partner have been looking at moving to Spain, and that all of a sudden raises lots of questions for that. I think seeing we have such a privilege, it's madness to put that at risk and to put restrictions on that. It's a sign of how little we value that we take that right away from other people, that we restrict people's movement across our borders to the degree that we do. Yet we think nothing of moving to any country in the world and setting up home there, but people can't do the same if it means coming to our country. And often their reasons for moving are much better and much more urgent than ours. And if you have a right then you also have a responsibility, and your responsibility is to ensure that others have that right. I think we have this freedom of movement, and I think to risk that is an insanity, and to deny that to others is a crime. It's a huge crime. I think in some ways I'd like to leave as little trace as possible. I would like to leave more trees. I'm developing a tendency to rescue trees from areas where they're going to get chopped down, you know, if they're growing through a pavement or something like that, or out of the size of buildings or something, and rescuing them and nurturing them and hopefully planting them. So I'd like to leave more trees. Well, I'm quite at ease with the notion that one day I won't be here, and I don't see that as particularly important or problematic in the great scheme of things. I hope that more people will be happy at having known me, than will be sad that I'm not there. I could spend the whole of the rest of my life surrounded by trees and never see another human being, but I couldn't spend the rest of my life surrounded by human beings and never see another tree. I think that's possibly why I wear shoes at all times that mean I can get muddy without it being a problem, and wade through rivers and deal with rocky terrains, because I think that's what I'm always hoping to get back to.